Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Craig Stockton. I'm the Chief Executive of MND Scotland. And what I would like to do in the next 10 minutes is outline some of the steps that have taken place over the last 2 years, which I think lays a good foundation for taking care forward within Scotland. Let me give you just a brief outline as to Scotland itself. It has a population of 5.4 million. We have a National Health Service. The National Health Service is free at point of contact. But underneath that, we have 14 health boards who are responsible for the administration of the health service. And then underneath that, we also have 32 local authorities, 32 councils. And the councils, as in our context, are responsible for social care. So the care that is given to people for washing, helping to eat, helping to get dressed in the morning, that type of thing. And the two of those have been separate. There is a move to try and bring the two of them together. It's a welcome move, and in 2015, the government announced that health and social care were going to integrate together. Over the last year, pilot organisations have been set up to do that. We are still in the very early stages of it, and the main stumbling blocks are the finances, i.e. whose budget things are going to come out of. And I'll speak a wee bit more about that as we go on. And to put it into context, and within Scotland currently we have 472 people who have motor neuron disease. We know 99% of the people who have the condition within Scotland. Our own organisation has contact with 80% of them. And what we want to try and do is increase that number and increase the service that is given. So what's happened over the last few years? Why do I think there has been a phased shift? Why do I think there has been a change, a significant change? Well, first of all, the Scottish Government, when it came into power, made free personal care available for those who were over 65. So anyone who was over 65 within Scotland was given free personal care. If you were under 65, then you had to pay for it. We as an organisation felt that there was something we could do there, so we started to lobby government and got on board some partners, which I'll speak about later on. And we were successful in making the government change its stance so that anyone with a terminal illness who was under 65 would actually get free personal care. And then, similar to Arafat this morning, we also recognised that there was a discrepancy with AAC equipment. And as such, we took it to the government last year. We suggested that it should become a legal right within Scotland to have AAC equipment. And the Scottish Government agreed and pushed through legislation within 1 month to get that legislation through. Now, that sounds great. And the legislation is there. The process now is actually to make sure that the details of that are taken forward. And last year, we successfully had the doubling of MND nurses. Within Scotland, what we have is the services of the nurses are part of the health service. Up until 2015, they were funded through ourselves. And then in 2015, after a successful campaign, the Scottish Government agreed to fund the nurses and to double the number of them. And again, I'll speak a bit more about that in a minute. We've also, as an organisation, looked at how we provide counselling across Scotland. We have now put in place a system which should allow anyone within Scotland to have access to counselling. And similar, one of the things that we were doing was complementary therapies. And again, we've put a very similar system into place on the counselling, which means that people should be able to access complementary therapies across Scotland at no cost to themselves. It's our organisation that will pick up the cost for both the counselling and complementary therapies. And with all these changes and the doubling of the nurses, we felt strongly that there had to be and national oversight of what was actually going on. And again, as part of the process of getting the doubling of nurses, we argued strongly that there needed to be something or someone put in place that could oversee all the changes that were taking place. And I'll speak more about that in just 1 minute. And the other thing we wanted was standardised national data collection. We have an MND register within Scotland. It was the first MND register in the world. It then went into abeyance in 1989 and was restarted in 2010. And since then, it's been running. But what we found was that some of the data that was getting collected was not standardised across Scotland, so there were gaps in the data. And what we wanted to try and do was to create a new way of making sure that we collected the same information for all patients. And many of you will know that the movement with the research now shows that there is some cognitive impairment, behavioural impairment within up to 50% of people, and we need to recognise that. So as part of the clinical side of things, we now have nationwide cognitive assessment when somebody is diagnosed. It's offered to them, it's up to them whether they take that up, but the offer is to every single person who is diagnosed with MND. And over all of this is trying to bring together the care aspects and the research aspects, and to make them more working together. So within that, we also have, from the Scottish Government, supported research. So we have an MND Clinical Fellowship in which the Scottish Government are putting money into, and just this year, in fact, just at this very time, the Scottish Government has agreed to fund 3 PhD studentships, specifically into MND. They've also done the same for MS. So what about I want to pick on 3 of those things that I've just talked about. So MND nurses. The nurses were first announced in January 2015, and there was a commitment to double those nurses. We had 5.9 whole-time equivalent nurses. Those nurses work within the NHS. They are connected to the 4 neurological centres within Scotland, but the service in which we deliver is clinic-based and home-based. So it's down to the nurses to actually go out and to visit patients, to assess them, and to coordinate the care that goes around there. Now, before we got the doubling of the nurses, we had some of them had caseloads of over 100 patients. Now that we have doubled them, and as you'll see from the figures there, we now have more than double of the nurses, so we have 13 and a quarter whole-time equivalents. So the caseloads are now more like 40 to 50 patients per nurse. What does that mean? What it means is increased patient contact. We want to be able to see and to show that by doubling those nurses, that patients have greater access, and that through that greater access, that they will have improved interventions and improved care. And although we're at the stage just now where the last post was filled just a few months ago, we are already seeing that there is an increase in the number of actual contacts and visits that people can do. We will be monitoring that over the next few years. I mentioned that we wanted to have a national oversight. Well, part of the national oversight is the creation of the first MND nurse consultant within Scotland for a neurological condition. And she is now in post. Judy took up post in April. And her role is to oversee these 14 health boards and the MND nurses, and to try and ensure that no matter where you are within Scotland, that you receive the standard basic level of care. And that level of care should not vary. There are variations within local areas, and we would expect that, but as a basic level, we expect to see that accessible to everyone. Part of the role is also to promote research. We have some research projects going on within Scotland, and we want to be able to improve that and to bring that closer to the care team. And part of the role is also there to support the care team itself, so these nurses that are out there working within that. key to all of this is national data collection. And what we're trying to do is create a holistic approach. So from diagnosis, evaluation, recording of the clinical progress, and therapeutic interventions, all in the same one standard document. So we have one document that we are looking to have every single patient recorded on. And that will then tie up to the register itself. It means that we'll be able to do an audit, a proper audit of the standards that we are providing within Scotland, and from that identify where gaps are that we can move things forward. And the ultimate aim is to move it from this paper-based system to an electronic version. So from the MND Register, the register is an active process. The person with MND has to say that they are willing to go into the register. So just now you'll see there that we have 62% of MND patients within Scotland on the actual register. That figure is increasing, and part of the role now of having the nurses themselves will push that number up, and we are starting to see that already. And we can look at it from the different health board areas where we have some greater success, and that part of that is down to where some of the nurses have been and where some of the new ones are. So how has this come about? Well, primarily partnership working. First and foremost were the patients. The patients were driving this, and we have been fortunate to have some very active patients, both politically and within the media. That in itself has meant that we have had access to the 5 main leaders in the Scottish Parliament. So every Scottish party, their leader has signed up to helping support the work that we do. And that has given us access to the Scottish First Minister, which in turn has led to support from the Scottish Government. And over the last 2 years, we have had significant support from the Scottish Government. And as well as that, we also have other partners that we've been using. So Edinburgh University, the NHS within Scotland, and COSLA, which is the local authorities work group. So patients, key to everything that we do. As I say, we've been fortunate that each of these 4 patients have been very active. One has a background in political side of things, and that primarily has given us the access to the Scottish Government. We also have one of the youngest people, well, the youngest currently in Scotland, Lucy, who was diagnosed at 19, and has been very active in blogging and social media, etc. So, I don't need you. So for partnerships, I said it 2 minutes early, for partnerships with the lead nurse, we have funding from the Scottish Government. We're working with with Edinburgh University where we have funding, and there's funding from ourselves as well to push that role forward. Similarly, we have MND Clinical Fellowship, and again, that's jointly funded between ourselves, the MND Association of England, Wales and Northern Ireland, and the Edinburgh University. And the National Proforma, this collection of data, is funded through the NHS, ourselves, and Edinburgh University as well, working in partnership. What have been some of the issues? Well, some of the issues is getting the buy-in from the clinicians. When we first introduced the Proforma, people were thinking it was about research, and the clinicians can be a bit titchy about doing some research. That is improving. Because of the high profile we've had, we're getting increased scrutiny from the Scottish Government, quite rightly so. But we also know that if we're successful in the way that we're doing this, then it will get rolled out to other conditions. And the other thing is increased expectations. Patients are seeing the success that we're putting in, and they themselves have expectations, and their expectations rise. And it's a challenge for us to make sure that we can meet those expectations. So what's the hope of all this? Why are we doing it? Mainly to improve care, increase the quality of life, and to ensure longer survival for those with MND. Thank you very much.
We have time for one question, if we... Okay, 2.
They're going to fight about it.
Thanks, Craig. That was great. The issue of building the database. In Victoria and in Australia, we've moved to an opt-out system rather than an opt-in. And we've shifted our database in Victoria, where we started, from about 60% up to about 98%. And I think we all should start thinking about picking up an opt-out model rather than an opt-in. And I'd expect you'd see a huge shift by running it that way.
Yeah, I would agree, Rob. We have looked at an opt-out system within that. However, the feeling of the people who are involved in it just now is that they don't want to move to that. I'm sure we will revisit it again, because I do agree with you. I think that the numbers by opting out are going to increase within that. We're going to give it the increased doubling of the nurses, see how that actually has an effect on the figures that we have, and then see and revisit that.
Craig, thank you. Comment for you. While you were talking, I did some number crunching. So 5.4 million population, 472 people with MND. So that's working out at 8.75 per 100,000, significantly over the stuff that is normally mentioned of 6 per 100,000.
Yep.
Wonder if you could comment on the reasons why you think that is?
Reasons I'm not that sure about. We will be presenting some data just early part of next year, which shows that yes, there has been a significant increase in the figures, both in incidence and prevalence within there. As to why numbers are so high, part of it, as we all know, is the ageing population. We're going to see that coming through. I would like to think that the reason why we're seeing the prevalence figure increasing is partly because of better care. And that's what I would like to see from putting this in place. We would see that greater survival coming through. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.